Hello, welcome to iFanboy Special Edition Watchmen Chapter 2. My name is Conor Kilpatrick, and with me is Dr. Ryan Haupt.
Hey, everybody.
And we are here, perhaps the final gathering of the iFanboy Animated Brain Trust, the abbreviated group, talking about possibly the last of the films. We've talked about them all, and we do have to apologize because Watchmen Chapter 2 came out in December, and here we are in March. And what happened was the holidays are really busy, and it's really busy at iFanboy headquarters. The holidays are trying to get all the shows done. The year-end show takes a lot of work, and it just sort of slipped through the cracks. And I forgot about it.
Right, and much like the masked heroes have to deal with the fallout of the Keene Act, we are also dealing with the fallout of new legislation coming at us hot and heavy. At least I am. And so, my work.
Actually, I'd like to thank several viewers, listeners, who all messaged me the same week for some reason, asking where this review was, and I was like, "Oh shit, Watchmen Chapter 2." And I had thought about it because we liked, and we'll put a link to the show into the show notes for the first review, Watchmen Chapter 1, which Josh Flanagan joined us for that one, and we liked that one a lot. I just had forgotten about it and came out during the possible wrong time. So now we're here. And we're going to talk about it. So spoilers going forward for Watchmen Chapter 2. And as we said, this is the last film in the DC Universe animated original line, as far as we know. I mean, they haven't announced anything. It's been a year and change, but pretty sure this is it. The line that started way back with Superman. What was the name of the first one? Why did I not look this up before I started talking? What is wrong with me? It's the final episode. Superman Doomsday back in 2007 was the first of these films. This is the 58th feature-length film, or at least full-length film from this DC Universe animated original line. As with the first chapter, directed and produced by Brandon Vitti and written by J. Michael Straczynski, based on obviously Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons.
I didn't see Alan Moore's name in the credits, though.
You did not see Alan Moore's name in the credits, but it's there in spirit. So like I said, we'll put the link in the show notes. We all liked the first one quite a bit. Obviously, it's obviously a great story, but the adaptation was really strong. And I just want to preface this. I mean, people who have downloaded this or are watching on YouTube obviously know the length already, but this might be a shorter episode because unless things go wildly off track, like what happened with Crisis on Infinite Earths, there's probably not a lot to talk about in the second part. It's all pretty much the same thing.
Yeah,
but we'll pop.
They continued to adapt Watchmen.
they did a really good job again. So let's talk about it. The first one, I believe, if I'm correct, ended with the arrest of Rorschach, right? That's how the first one ended. And so, I loved this. I mean, I loved the first one. I loved this. I think it's almost fitting, Ryan. I think that the most faithful adaptation they've done of all these movies is Watchmen. I mean, this is basically straight up. We talked about that in the first part, but they've had to make concessions for all these movies, and some of them are wildly not from the these movies are almost all based on a comic book source material. And some of them are wildly different than the source material. Some are pretty close, but this is by far, I think, the most faithful. I mean, not they can't do everything in two 90-minute adaptations, but they got almost everything, and it's pretty close. I didn't really notice any major changes, but it's been a little while since I've read the comic. Did you notice anything major changes?
They cut the scene where Dryberg and Laurie fight a bunch of punks and instead just have them do the fire rescue.
Right. That's right.
Which I actually thought was a significant change. We can get into maybe more philosophically why I think that, but I think it undercuts sort of the infantilization power fantasy of the superheroes that Alan Moore was trying to get across in his exploration of the psyche. But other than that, that was the only change I caught.
Yeah, but I mean, it still pretty much says Dan can literally only get an erection when he's got the quote unquote pervert suit on.
True, but they had him get an erection after rescuing people rather than beating people, and I think that's true. I think there's a difference there.
There's a very difference in terms of the sex and violence aspect of it.
Yes,
but you know, one of the things I really love about the second half of this story is that the romance. I really do like the Dan Laurie romance. It's fucked up and weird, but they have had fucked up and weird lives, and I really like them together. He's a nice guy. She's damaged, but needs love, and she doesn't get it from Dr. Manhattan because he's not capable of it. And even though he does care for her, I loved watching that unfold in this part, and I was really into it. I know how this movie ends, but I was into it. I was riveted. I mean, what did you think of the second chapter?
I greatly enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic.
I really like let's talk about the animation because I really like it. I know it's somewhat controversial, but
it's cel shaded.
I really like it because it's certainly stiff in parts. There was a couple of times when like they really had to like emote, and it didn't really, like they were stiff. There was one point when Dan is yelling at Rorschach at the end, and his face doesn't really convey yelling, but I like it otherwise because I thought it really captured the Dave Gibbons' style really well.
It did, and it I like that it adds a three-dimensionality to the characters. Like you can, none of the renderings feel flat. They feel like they have texture and depth. Mm-hmm. I think the only thing that I bump on when I first start watching, I remember this happening with the first time I watched the chapter 1 and the first time I started this movie, is it momentarily feels like a video game cut sequence. And then once I get past that and into the story, and the story is not hard to get into because it's incredibly compelling, I leave all that behind and I'm just in it.
I think to me it was these two films fulfilled the promise of this line, which was they adapted the comic, they stayed true to the comic. It looks like the comic. I mean, obviously a little different because it's 3D animation, but the style is very Dave Gibbons-y. It feels like they just took the comic and made it come to life, and that was the promise of the line back in 2007. And they would come close; they would skirt the edges of that, but how close was Crisis on Infinite Earths? Not really at all. And that's the big one. That's their big last superhero one they did. And throughout the years we came and went. We had some really good ones, but this was the one like, wow, we're actually doing it here. I wish they'd all kind of been this way. But is there anything? I mean, it's hard because we've had this in so many incarnations. This story, we've had a live action film, we've had a live action TV show, we've had comics, now an animation. But was there anything that you sort of appreciated this time around that you didn't before, or didn't appreciate? Like, is there anything that was different in animation that was working or not working?
Yeah, I think I felt this last time I mentioned that sort of the way the world is different because of the influence of the mass heroes, especially Dr. Manhattan, I feel is a little more acute in the animated version, like watching people plug and unplug their cars in from the little hydrant power charging stations. Cool. I loved you've got a picture of Archimedes, the Night Owl's craft up on the screen. I loved the way they animated that. I'm usually very annoyed by the CGI vehicles, but the way they had the lights flickering, the tactileness of the interface where Dan was controlling everything with that very clunky but iconographic interface was fantastic. I thought the visceralness of like Laurie getting transported to Mars and not being able to breathe and being cold in that skimpy outfit was handled really well in the animation. The creature itself, I thought, was really well done. I noticed, I think there are things that I picked up on my third or fourth reading of Watchmen that I picked up much more immediately in the animated version. The fact that all of the work, this was harped on in the show as well. The fact that all the people working in Antarctica are Vietnamese, like that to me was really, wasn't oversold in this adaptation, but it was really clear that like, oh, he brought people back from Vietnam to Antarctica to work in his mansion and then kills them.
I'm nodding along with you because I'm agreeing with just everything you're saying. I loved the way that Archie was lit, like there's just things you can't do in comics, right? It's static imagery, and and that leads its own awesomeness in its own way. But there's things you can do in animation. I love the way it moved. I love the way the lights, they had this. It didn't occur to me that it had this sort of outside lighting, which was cool. The flame stuff, which looked awesome when they were.
There was even a moment when when Dan and Lori fell asleep in front of the TV after failing to consummate their relationship, and the TV is casting this blue glow on them, and I don't remember if that's in the comics or not, but I'm like, oh, that's such a nice little touch of like Dr. Manhattan still has this, literally casting a shadow, casting his light on their relationship, in this unspoken way.
All those kind of things are things you just can't do, with sound or music. Creating sort of a 3-dimensional world, which is just, you can't, you do it in your head, in your imagination, but you can, I don't think I ever felt the TV show did a really good job with the aftermath of the octopus attack. The movie didn't do it at all. So here this is the first time we actually see the thing happen in motion, and it was fairly horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and so you can see why in the TV show they had everyone with like octopus PTSD, because and it's up on the screen, when that giant squid, lands in the city, and it basically kills everyone that we've been following along who's not in the Watchmen, and the way it explodes the world around it, the light, the tachyon energy around it, like they did a really good job of making this thing feel like a momentous event that would have really, scar the entire populace. I thought it was really compelling.
A thing I noticed this in watching this that I'm sure is true in the book, but I didn't go back to reference it. I mean, I think one of my favorite pages in all of comics is Ozymandias saying, Why would I tell you my plan if I hadn't already done it? I did it 35 minutes ago.
Right.
And I never noticed that, like, he literally presses the button at 11:25. So it's midnight when he says that, and the doomsday clock hits midnight, end of the world. Like, it's beautiful. And then what you said a second ago about, like, I always think of it as a squid monster more than an octopus monster.
Yeah,
same
squid.
Cephalopod horror, regardless. I always love, because, like, the first time I read Watchmen, I'm reading the first chapter, comedian gets thrown out a window, Rorschach is investigating, but it's also like this very familiar back and forth between these two detectives who are trying to solve the case, and not having any clue what Watchmen was about going into it. I thought, oh, this is going to be a murder mystery with these two detectives. And those two detectives completely fade from the story.
Right.
And then you see them at the very end, right before they die. And you're like, oh yeah, I remember those guys from the beginning of the story. And I think it's a testament to Alan Moore's skill as a writer that, like, when you read that first chapter, the first comic book chapter of Watchmen, you believe that these two characters have fully fleshed out backstories, lives, relationships, such that they could be the main characters of the story.
Right.
But then the story just pivots, and then it brings you back and just gives you a little taste of it right at the very end. Be like, remember these guys? But you forgot about them, but I didn't, because I'm Alan Moore.
Were they in? Yeah, I guess they were. I'm looking at it right now, the Absolute Edition. So I guess that's them right there in the middle.
My Absolute Edition's around here somewhere.
So yeah, so like in the book, we only really have like this one page of it hitting and going to white, right? We only really have this. So the cartoon makes it much more horrific, I think, and I don't want to say did it better, but it kind of did, because you really felt the trauma of it. Now here in the comic, you can fill it in yourself and make it as horrific as you want, but I kind of really liked seeing that play out. And I do want to say something. I mean, look, nothing's going to beat the opening of the chapter when everyone's horrifically dead. I mean, that's just that, even the animation couldn't do that. This is more bloody than they were ever going to make it. But I want to caveat this to a million degrees, but the comedian is an awful, awful monster. However, there's one point in this movie where he's talking to Laurie's mom. I forgot her name.
Sally.
And I think he's trying to not take ownership of Laurie, but sort of, be like, I'm her dad. And she really cuts him down, and he's really hurt. And I felt bad for him for an instant. And it was something you really can't do in the comic, because it was all in the voice. It was all in the voice acting. And look, he's a monster. But like, there was a moment I was like, oh, that sucks. But then I was like, oh, he's a monster. But that's another thing you just really can't do. That was the power of Troy Baker's performance. He was comedian, right? That's who he was.
I thought it was Titus Welliver.
No, that Titus Welliver was Rorschach.
Oh, okay.
No, comedian was Troy Baker was Adrian. What is wrong with me?
I'm on record as a Troy Baker fan. I didn't think
Troy Baker's terrific.
Didn't sound like Troy Baker to me.
He's Titus. Well, I don't know. I can't find it. Anyway, whoever. Oh, it was Rick Wasserman. They had a mix of like. That's the thing about this movie. They had a mix of like veteran voice actors and then celebrities, which DC has gone very celebrity heavy traditionally in these movies. But I thought this was like a top notch product from top to bottom. It really was.
We haven't mentioned it yet, but Francisco Francavilla's version of the Black Freighter story.
Yeah.
It's so gorgeous to look at.
So this was my first time ever
experiencing that part of the story.
Experienced the pirate stuff, and
wild to me.
I don't know. It didn't really add much. I mean, it was difficult because they had it like voiceover matching what was happening on the screen with the action in Watchmen, whereas in the comic it's just the pirate stuff, kinda, I think. But it didn't really add anything, honestly.
I think the metaphor, the Black Freighter metaphor, even in the original comic, is a stretch.
Mm-hmm.
I've always felt that. I've never felt like it fully syncs up with what's actually happening in the events of the book, but I just thought this particular rendition of it, watching someone with Francisco Francavilla's talent transcribe sort of Dave Gibbons' art was just a fun treat, just a little visual.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
that stuff was great.
Interestingness.
If I'm gonna only my only real criticism, I didn't really have a ton, was that the ending, the final sort of stinger of the story is that Rorschach's journal ends up at the New Frontiersman slush pile, and will they publish it? What'll happen? I felt like that was kind of a toss off here because it happens sort of over the credits. You don't really get the weight of what that could mean. It's just sort of like it's almost treated like a funny thing that happens.
I don't know. I guess here in 2025, like that hits differently. Like with the first
totally, but in the context of the world in 1986, like it just felt like to me it always was a very portentous moment where it could just what's going to happen. This could change things.
Right, but I feel like in our world, like juxtaposing it to our world, which I know you're cautioning against, but where my head goes is that if Alex Jones published some journal from someone he said,
right, but you're dealing with a pre-internet world here where people trusted what they read in the news. So
no, they shouldn't trust the New Frontiersman even in this
right, but they did. So
do they? I don't know. I always got in my more recent rereadings of Watchmen, I feel like we're supposed to think that the New Frontiersman is a bit of a rag.
It is, but it's still a different. You can't take 86 and 2025 and put them together culturally. They're just completely different. They're basically alien worlds to each other. It's theoretically possible that what starts the New Frontiersman ends up on the CBS Evening News in 1986. That's entirely possible, whereas not today. And people would watch that and watch Walter Cronkite or Dan Rather talk about it and would change their minds. That wouldn't happen today. But to me, that was always like the thing, like what's going to happen here. It's almost treated like, and I don't know if it's because we're conditioned to think of stuff during the credits as kind of silly, but it's almost treated like an afterthought. But that was my only minor criticism, which is not a major criticism. Did you feel melancholy watching this? I felt a little melancholy, Ryan.
No, because I was just really enjoying it. Like I enjoyed it enough that I wasn't thinking about this being an ending. I mean, what does Dr. Manhattan say? Nothing ever ends, Adrian. So
right, except the Animation Brain Trust if there's no more movies to review. We've been doing this for so long. I've not been in every one of these, but I've been in probably 95% of all these reviews, and we've had such a good time over the years talking about these movies and what's worked and what hasn't worked, and the ones we've liked and the ones. It was much fun to talk about the ones we didn't like, and it was just sort of a bummer, I'm so glad it went out on a high note and not like on a Suicide Squad movie, but.
You mean the fantastic Suicide Squad movie that we all enjoyed? It was well beloved by all.
I'm very curious to see what happens next. I mean, the assumption we had when we turned out to be right was that these were ending with the James Gunn regime, and then he was going to be doing his own animation, which he has, these Creature Commandos, which I have zero interest in. And so it'll be interesting to see what else comes out, if they are going to do any kind of movies. Because so far they've only done series. The Creature Commandos did that Superman series, and we'll see. But this might be Might be the end of the road for us.
I mean, we did season 1 of Invincible. Season 3 is coming out now in fits and spurts.
Listen, I offered you guys to do X-Men 97, and no one took me up on it. So
I mean, does it have to? I mean, we're putting this out months after the fact. How current do we have to be? I would say let's go back and do a batch of the Fleischer Superman cartoons. How fun would that be?
It might be, but let's not have a staff meeting on the air.
Yes, sir.
Anything else? I mean, I really like the Hollis Mason. You know, it's obviously sad when the knotheads kill him, but I like the way they handle the flashbacking, where he's basically in his head, he's young and the superhero again,
Vital, yeah,
fighting his supervillains, and I thought that was great.
I mean, Matthew Rhys just turns in a great performance. I really felt the emotion when he's confronting Rorschach about, like, you're a terrible friend, and I'm like, yes, Matthew, tell him.
That's the scene where I was like, the animation is not good enough for this, but that's the only part I really thought about. I just love, you can see on the screen now, I love the sort of flirtation, falling in love between Dan and Laurie. They're both kind of nerdy, you know, they're both kind of not well adjusted for good reasons. And I liked that bit a lot. I just found myself really sort of falling for that. I mean, this is rated R, and the first part featured quite a bit of nudity, but still kind of surprised about how much nudity was in this movie. Almost all the nudity from the comic was in this movie.
Pretty much all the media I've been watching lately has like dogs in various levels of peril. Like I watched Fall Guy recently.
Okay. Yeah.
It has a lot of dogs in peril. And this had, Rorschach is not kind to dogs in this. I mean, it's accurate adaptation, but it's been on my mind.
Did he I'm trying to remember, because this might have been more in the first part in the flashbacks. Did Titus Welliver do a different voice for the pre-Rorschach?
I don't think he says anything.
Well, because in the film, like, because the moment he becomes Rorschach for real is when he kills those dogs and he kills the dude.
In this movie, they had him closing his eyes behind the mask and then opening them behind the mask, and it goes from true color to like a red tint.
Right.
I don't remember there being any change in his voice.
Well, I remember. I don't know if this was in the first one. At some point in one of these adaptations, when we flash back to them meeting as a group,
that was in the previous one,
right? But it was either this or the movies. I don't remember which. When he's with Dan in that group, he's not speaking quite so gravelly.
Yeah, I would have to go back and check, but that's in the previous film.
That would have been in the previous film. I can't remember that.
The flashback here is when he's talking to the psychiatrist with the actual Rorschach test, which I'm just like, as a professional psychiatrist, wouldn't you know that that's like not the best strategy with this particular patient?
That's the irony.
Pretty butterfly.
Maybe he was seeing a pretty butterfly. We know
that's not true. As the viewers, and I know they're not viewers, we know that's not true.
That guy's dead anyway. He was there. They're all dead. I felt really bad for the kid and the newspaper seller.
Yeah, but I really love that. I love that relationship. That's
it's great.
That's one of my favorite relationships in the original comic.
And he jumps on the kid to save him,
exactly,
to protect him.
with no hesitation, and I love that. I mean, to me, that's like almost an homage to like Clark Kent's a newsman. So the newsman saves the kid. Like, well,
I don't think he saves the kid. I think they're both dead anyway.
Tries.
But, he's the only one who's figured it all out. He's got his conspiracies. They're all right. He's almost got a murder board with all his papers, and he's the only one who knows what's really going on.
He's also literally had Rorschach marching back and forth in front of his newsstand for years now, maybe.
Yeah, can you imagine how cool that revelation was back then when the comic was coming out? I mean, we all knew it. We've all, pretty much anyone here talking or listening wasn't reading it when it came out, but that must have been so awesome.
I didn't read Watchmen until college, and I was able to go in completely blind. I'd never
so you didn't know that was the redhead?
No, so I'd read superhero comics for years, but when I got to college, my buddy said, "Oh, have you never read Watchmen?" And he handed me a trade paperback of it, and I sat down and read it, front to back, and was blown away. Had nothing spoiled ahead of time. It was an amazing comic experience.
I know I'm going to ask you, and you're going to be like, I don't know, man. Did they put out a full version of Dark Knight Returns as one movie?
No, Dark Knight Returns was 2 parts, I believe.
Right, but did they put a second one out that was just all together? Nope. I found myself wishing I could get a version of this that was just one version.
Yeah, I would say if I had one criticism of it, I don't like that they call it Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, because that feels like a that feels more literary. And I almost wish they called it part 1 and part 2, or episode 1, episode 2. Like, I almost wish they leaned into this being a filmic adaptation. No, I think it was just the 2-parter. I don't know.
Well, there is a Dark Knight Returns deluxe edition animated that seems to be both of them as one. It's 2.5 hours long.
Oh yeah, I see that now.
So maybe here you go, DC Warner Brothers. If you put out a Watchmen deluxe edition that's both these movies together with no break, I will happily buy that, because
we have to do another episode.
No, we'll be fine. We might do another episode. We did talk about this for when things finally ended. I think we're finally, for sure, this is the end of where you and Paul and I get back together and we sort of lay out our favorites and least favorites of, because we've had a lot to talk about over the years.
Oh yeah.
Not that I'm going to rewatch them. I've got them all. I've got every single disc, but I'm like, I don't have time to rewatch them. But we can talk about it. I really enjoyed this time with these movies. I enjoyed watching this movie. I enjoyed this time we spent over the last however many years talking about them. I know we're not eulogizing it quite yet. Well, it's over, but we're not. If we do one more episode, we'll eulogize it then. But I'm glad we went out on a high note. I'm really glad we did. I'm glad it wasn't Crisis. As much fun as the final chapter was, it was ultimately all let down. I'm glad we went out on a super high note with these, because this was so good.
It was really good.
Great job. I mean, honestly, I have to give J. Michael Straczynski credit. Obviously, he's adapting, but they did a good job of adapting it. And Brandon Beatty did a really, really good job of directing it. The animation style was perfect, and it just showed that this story is great, no matter what format it's in. I enjoyed the live action film, but I think this movie kind of puts that to shame a bit.
Yeah, I think I said this in the last episode we did. This runs circles around the live action one.
Yeah. Oh, it totally does. But I liked it. I watched it fairly recently. It was on TV and it just started. It's like,
I felt like they even took. I feel like when Archie was coming up out of the water, they even took like the music cue from the live action movie, and it worked. Like, I was like, yeah, that's a good music cue. A lot of Zack Snyder's music choices are a little on the nose, but
they were from the book.
Yeah.
They didn't do any of that here. No music budget for this one. Yeah, this is really good. If for some reason you've never read Watchmen or seen any Watchmen stuff, this is a great play. I mean, I read it, but if you want to, or if you've read it but never watched one of the adaptations, this is the one to watch. Watch this 2-part movie. It's really, really good. Obviously the HBO show is good, but it's a different thing. It's not the book. But yeah, this was
Connor. It's literally snowing here. We're gonna get 4 to 5 inches tonight, or we already got probably 2 or 3 out there. And I literally made borscht this evening. So I think if you make burgers, we're covered. So we'll have burgers and borscht.
I wasn't planning on it.
Okay.
And I just got home from the grocery store, and so that might be out the window. But
I'd never made borscht before, but our turns out a winter CSA gives you.
Is that a beet-based food?
Yeah, well, it's beets, potatoes, carrots, onions. I was worried that it was going to be too beet heavy, but the beets sort of blend into the background enough that I find it palatable.
A little earthy for me.
We have so many beets.
Why?
Because we have a winter CSA, and turns out what grows in winter. CSA is community supported agriculture, so we get a box of vegetables from local farms every week. And turns out in the wintertime you get potatoes and carrots and beets and sweet potatoes and all the things you associate with growing underground. And couldn't
you put those beets in like the compost bin?
I put the peels in the compost bin.
This show's taken a turn. It started about Watchmen, and now it's about beets, and no one's happy with that development.
It's the bite method. I'm just following the bite method.
I understand. Listen, everyone was great this movie. I thought terrific job. I still got chills when you said I did it 35 minutes ago. Like, it's such a great moment in comics. It's the most famous comics line of all time. And listen, check it out. Any final thoughts before we say good day, sir?
No.
Any final thoughts on the movie or anything?
Nope. I recommend everyone check it out.
All right. Well, let's. This thing's not letting me do anything I want to do, which is being annoying. Let's say goodbye. So Watchmen Chapter 2, you can check it out. It is for available for rent or buy online. I bought the disc. You can talk about it at iFanboy.com. Well, you can't. There's no more comments there, but I don't know what's happening. I got distracted by trying to do something and it didn't work, and so now I can't do it. I'll just say this: we have a t-shirt store at ifanboy.threadless.com. There are shirts there, and I'm just going to say that they're there, and I don't know, it's just a complete sort of coincidence that I'm mentioning it, but there may be shirts of interest for you there, and I'm finally going to get to add this to the store. I mean, look, I don't know, this complete random shirts that you might want to buy at ifanboy.threadless.com, and that's cool. And there's other shirts too that we've got that you might find interesting. I mean, just randomly clicking on things that have nothing to do with anything we talked about earlier. And, check them out. That's all available at fanboy.threadless.com for you to enjoy, should you choose to do so. And it's just a random t-shirt. That's all it is. So, Ryan, any final things to say before we go?
No, long live the Animated Brain Trust.
Thanks for listening. You can always find us at ifanboy.com. That's where all of our podcasts are. Ryan and I and Josh Flanagan will talk about the week's comics. That is something we do at ifanboy.com. We also have our special edition shows like this one where we review films. Last month we reviewed Captain America Brave New World. We have our monthly Media Splode show, our monthly Talksplode / Booksplode shows. All of those are available at fanboy.com. Over 1,400 shows for you to enjoy and listen to, including a review of every single DC Universe animated original film that ever came out. They're all
one
there.
Marvel one.
I think we did 2, right? There was the Thor.
We did Planet Hulk, and we did.
There were 2.
A Black Widow Punisher one.
Yeah, so there were definitely 2, and they were awful.
Planet Hulk was okay.
They were awful. They were pretty bad. But thank you for listening over the years to the various Animated Brain Trust reviews. We will come back at some point and either say goodbye or we'll come back with some other kind of reviews that you've never even thought about. And it'll be fun. And thanks to everybody. And we'll be back next time. Until then, I'm Conor.
And I'm Ryan.
See you next time at the movies.